Submitted by Eric T. from Flagstaff, Arizona. Let me start by saying I never believed in anything paranormal before this happened. No ghosts, no demons, no spirits, none of it. I'm not religious either, so I never really gave much thought to the concept of good and evil in a spiritual sense. But after what I experienced over the course of 5 months last year, I'm not sure where I stand anymore. This happened in Flagstaff, Arizona. I had just moved into a small one-bedroom apartment on the west side of town near Thorpe Park. It wasn't anything special, just an older complex with thin walls and creaky floors. But it was affordable, and I was tired of living with roommates. I work as a nighttime security guard at a local warehouse. It's mostly uneventful, which is how I like it. I'd come home around 5 a.m., sleep during the day, and wake up around 2 in the afternoon. I kept my blinds shut to block the sun, wore an eye mask to help me sleep, your standard night shift routine. But about a week after I moved in, things started to get weird. The first incident was subtle. I remember waking up one afternoon in a panic, completely unable to move. I could open my eyes, and I could breathe, but I couldn't move a single muscle. My arms were pinned to my sides, my legs stiff as boards. It was like my whole body had been anesthetized. I had heard of sleep paralysis before, but I'd never experienced it. I assumed that's all it was, so I tried to calm myself down and ride it out. But then I saw something that made me question everything. Standing in the corner of my bedroom, just between the door and my dresser, was a tall black figure, completely black. No details, no face, no clothes, just a solid silhouette that absorbed the light. It didn't move. It didn't speak, but I felt it watching me. The moment I saw it, a crushing weight pushed down on my chest, like someone had sat on me. I couldn't breathe deeply. It felt like my lungs were filling up with cement. The panic got worse, and I tried screaming, but no sound came out. And then it was gone. Just like that. I shot up, gasping for air, covered in sweat. The room looked completely normal. No shadow, no figure, nothing. I chalked it up to a nightmare brought on by the move and stress of my new schedule. But deep down, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like I was fully awake. The second time it happened was about 3 days later. Same scenario. I had gone to bed around 6 a.m. after my shift. I woke up sometime in the early afternoon, completely paralyzed. This time I was already sweating when I opened my eyes. It was like my body knew what was coming before my brain did. And sure enough, it was back. The same black figure, same corner of the room. Only this time, it was closer. It stood directly at the foot of my bed. And this time, I swear to God, I heard breathing. It was deep, raspy, like someone who had smoked a pack a day for 30 years. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The figure slowly leaned forward, and even though I couldn't move my head, I could see the shape of it getting closer. The moment its head passed the edge of the bed, I felt it again. That crushing, suffocating weight on my chest, like a boulder. But there was more. This time I could feel its hands. It placed them on my chest, ice cold, heavy, with long fingers that pressed against my ribs. I could feel each fingertip individually, like they were real, physical things. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. And then, again, it was gone. I sat up and dry heaved on the side of my bed. I didn't sleep the rest of that day. That's when I started doing research. I looked into sleep paralysis online, and yeah, sure. There are a million articles about how it's a harmless neurological glitch, but there were just as many posts from people saying they saw shadowy figures, or felt something in the room with them. Some called it the Hat Man. Others called it an old hag. One story even described exactly what I was going through, a shadow figure that sat on the chest and paralyzed them. Some people said it was just the brain waking up before the body. Others swore it was demonic. That's when I started noticing it happening at very specific times, always between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., right in the middle of my sleep cycle. So I set up a cheap security camera in my room. Nothing fancy, just one of those $60 Wi-Fi cameras with motion detection. I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was actually there. Big mistake. On the 5th night, I had another episode. Same feeling. Same figure. This time, though, it didn't just stand there. It climbed onto the bed. I couldn't move, but I could feel the mattress dip under its weight. I felt its knees pressing against my thighs, its hands on my chest. The worst part? It leaned forward, and I felt its breath on my face. It was cold. Not like air conditioning cold. It was like opening a freezer. I remember whispering in my head over and over, "Please leave. Please go. Please get off me." And then, gone. I woke up and immediately checked the footage. The camera had picked up nothing unusual until 2:41 p.m. That's when it detected motion. The clip was only 14 seconds long. It showed me, completely still, lying in bed. But at the very end of the clip, the screen flickered. Just once, like a static glitch. And for a single frame, not even a second, something moved in the upper left corner of the room. I replayed it maybe 50 times. It looked like a figure, a dark shape moving from the corner toward my bed. But it was too fast, too distorted to be sure. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. After I saw that motion detection footage from my bedroom camera, I told myself I was done. I unplugged the camera, turned on every light in the apartment, and stayed up for 2 full days. I watched movies, drank coffee like water, and tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in the back of my mind that something was seriously wrong. On the 3rd day, I finally passed out from exhaustion. I slept for almost 11 hours straight, and for the first time in over a week, nothing happened. No paralysis, no shadow figure, no pressure on my chest, just dreamless, uninterrupted sleep. I woke up thinking maybe whatever this was had passed. Maybe it was just my body adjusting to the night shift, and all the shadow figure stuff was my brain misfiring during REM sleep. That's what I told myself anyway. I even threw away the eye mask and tried sleeping with the blinds open to let in the daylight. I thought if I could just convince myself it wasn't real, it would go away. But then, something even worse started happening. It was around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had just gotten off work and stopped at the Circle K on Milton Road for a Red Bull and some snacks. I was waiting in line at the register when I felt it. That pressure again. Not on my chest this time, but in the air around me. Thick, heavy, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. My skin went cold, and I broke out in goosebumps. I looked around. The cashier was scanning items for the guy in front of me, some kid with earbuds in. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake it. That feeling like I was being watched. It was identical to how I felt right before every sleep paralysis episode. When I finally made it to the counter, the cashier, some older woman, maybe in her 50s, looked at me weird. "You okay, hun? You look pale?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Just tired. Long night." But she kept staring at me. Right as she handed me my change, she froze for half a second, like she saw something over my shoulder. I turned around. Nothing there. But when I looked back at her, her eyes were wide. She didn't say anything. She just slowly stepped back from the counter. That was the first time I realized this thing, whatever it was, might not just exist in my dreams. Back home, I stayed awake on the couch for hours, lights on, TV playing in the background. I couldn't relax. I kept checking the corners of the room, especially near the hallway that led to my bedroom. Every time the shadows shifted on the wall from a passing car outside, I tensed up. At around 4 a.m., I dozed off. That was the first time it came to me while I was awake. I was in that in-between state, where you're not quite asleep, but not really conscious either. I opened my eyes and looked toward the hallway, and it was standing there, full body, tall, and darker than everything else around it. There were no visible eyes, but I knew it was staring at me. I didn't even have time to react before it rushed at me, fast, like a blur. One moment it was across the room, and in the next, it was on top of me, kneeling on my chest again. But this time, I wasn't asleep. I could move. I could feel. And that was the worst part. It wasn't just a weight. I felt its fingers inside my chest, not like stabbing or slicing, more like they were sinking into my rib cage, like it was trying to burrow into me. My vision went white, my ears rang, I screamed, and this time the sound actually came out. The lights flickered, and then, just like that, it vanished. I sat on the floor, shaking and drenched in sweat. My chest felt bruised, and when I looked in the mirror in the bathroom, I saw what looked like faint, hand-shaped welts over my ribs. 5 long, reddish marks, as if something had pressed down hard. That was the turning point. I knew I wasn't just hallucinating. I booked a motel that night. I stayed at a cheap Days Inn off Route 66 for the next 3 nights. I kept the lights on, the TV running, and didn't sleep more than a few hours each night. I even called my older brother, Noah, who lives in Tucson, and asked if I could crash at his place for a bit. He was cool about it. I didn't give him all the details, just said my apartment had mold issues and I needed a break. The night before I planned to drive out there, I finally fell into a deep sleep. And that's when I had the worst episode yet. I was lying in the motel bed, fully aware of where I was. I remember feeling the cheap sheets and hearing the dull hum of the AC unit. I could even smell the weird air freshener they use. One of those tropical breeze types that always smells more like chemicals than anything tropical. But I couldn't move, and the room was wrong. It was darker than it should have been, like the shadows had multiplied. I could feel it before I saw it, this freezing pressure in the air, like every molecule was being pulled toward the foot of the bed. And then, I heard it. A voice. Low, gravelly, impossible to understand, but definitely a voice. It spoke in a language I didn't recognize. It sounded ancient, like the rattling of dry leaves mixed with stone grinding on stone. I turned my eyes toward the corner of the room, and it was there, not standing, but crawling, on the ceiling. Its limbs moved unnaturally, bending in ways human joints shouldn't. It skittered across the ceiling like an insect, its head upside down, turned toward me the entire time. When it dropped to the floor, the whole room seemed to shake, and then it stood. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had a shape, a human shape, but wrong. Too tall, too thin. Its arms hung down to its knees. The space where a face should have been was just a void, an emptiness that seemed to absorb the light. It climbed onto the bed, straddled me, and lowered its face until it was inches from mine. And then it whispered, this time in English. "You let me in?" I woke up screaming. The motel manager actually came to check on me. He looked freaked out and asked if I needed medical attention. I lied and said I had a nightmare. He didn't seem to buy it. The next morning, I packed up and drove to Tucson. I stayed with my brother for a week. Nothing happened there. No dreams, no paralysis, no figures. I started to think maybe leaving the apartment had done the trick, that maybe it was the place that was cursed. I was wrong, because when I returned to Flagstaff to move out officially, I stayed one final night in the apartment. And that night, it came back. By the time I drove back to Flagstaff, I was convinced that leaving had worked. I was planning to grab the last of my stuff, turn in the keys, and break my lease. I'd already talked to the property manager, and while they weren't thrilled about me ending the lease early, they agreed to let me go after one final month's rent. I didn't care. I just wanted out. I arrived in the late afternoon. I didn't even plan to sleep there. My plan was to pack everything up in the U-Haul and drive back to Tucson the same night. But between the loading, disassembling furniture, and doing one last walkthrough, I lost track of time. The sun dipped below the horizon, and it got dark fast. By 9:30 p.m., I still had a few boxes left. I was exhausted, my back ached, and I made the worst decision I've made in my life. I told myself I'd take a short nap, just 30 minutes. Then I'd finish the last of the packing and get on the road. So I lay down on the bare mattress in the bedroom. No sheets, just the mattress and one pillow, and closed my eyes. I woke up in pitch black. My phone, which I had plugged in next to the bed, was dead. Completely dead. I hadn't even turned it off. No blinking lights, just black. I sat up and tried to orient myself, but the room felt wrong, still, heavy. I stood up and reached for the light switch. It didn't work. I walked out to the hallway. None of the lights worked. The power was out. I checked the kitchen. Microwave was blank. I even flipped the breaker panel by the closet. Nothing. I was about to grab my flashlight from the toolbox when I saw it. Something moved at the end of the hallway. Just for a second. But enough to make me freeze. I stood there, barely breathing, staring into the darkness, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Then I heard it. That same sound from the motel. A scraping noise, like nails or claws dragging across drywall. Slow, deliberate. It was coming from the bedroom. I turned and bolted for the front door, but it was locked, deadbolted from the inside, which didn't make sense because I hadn't locked it. I reached for the bolt, but my fingers stopped. I couldn't move them. It was like my hands had gone numb. That pressure came back again, like the air itself was thickening around me. And then I saw the hallway start to darken. Not like the lights turning off. No, it was darker than that. Like the shadows were bleeding into the room. The darkness moved. It pulsed. It swallowed everything. And from that moving blackness, it emerged. It wasn't crawling anymore. It walked, upright, confident, like it belonged there. Its limbs were still long and disproportionate. Its face was still just that black void. But now I could hear it, breathing, shallow and fast, like something excited or hungry. I stumbled backward into the living room. My legs worked, but barely. It felt like gravity had doubled. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. It stepped fully into the room, and then it spoke again, but not out loud, in my head. "This is your last sleep." The next thing I knew, I was on the floor, on my back. My vision had gone white again, and my limbs refused to move. It stood over me, looming. Then it climbed on top of me again, knees pinning down my arms, hands pressing into my chest. And then, something new. Its face began to change. It didn't morph or twist. It absorbed, like it was sucking the room into itself. Light, sound, thought, everything. I could feel my memories, actual memories, being pulled away. My first bike, my mom's laugh, a song I loved in high school. All of it was just slipping away, like threads being unwound. I tried to scream, but the weight on my chest only increased. It was like having a car parked on top of me. My ribs creaked, my eyes were open, and I could feel tears streaming down my face, but I couldn't move. Then, the fire alarm chirped, not the full alarm, just that high-pitched chirp it does when the battery is low. One, single, beep. The shadow figure flinched, just a little, but enough. I felt the weight lift slightly, and in that moment, something inside me broke. My hand shot up, and I reached out to grab anything, a couch cushion, a lamp, the air itself, and suddenly it was gone. The room was silent. I was alone. The lights flicked on, and the air felt normal again. I didn't wait. I grabbed my duffel bag, didn't even bother locking the door, and drove 3 hours straight back to Tucson. I left behind my mattress, half my clothes, and every single piece of furniture I had. I didn't care. It's been 6 months since that night. I'm living with my brother still, and the thing hasn't come back. But sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I feel it. Not physically, but like an idea, a presence, a memory that's not mine. And every now and then, I'll wake up gasping for air, the pressure on my chest, faint. Not like before, but enough to remind me. And once, just once, I was walking through a Home Depot, and a woman passed me in one of the aisles. She glanced at me and stepped away. Then she whispered under her breath, "It's still with you." I turned around. She was already gone. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever had sleep paralysis, ever felt that weight on your chest or seen something in the corner of your room that shouldn't be there, take my advice. Don't engage. Don't speak to it. Don't acknowledge it. Because if you do, you might just let it in.